Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dave Crouch, and this is Policy Talks. It's our monthly production from Williamson, Ymca, our county chamber of commerce, and we have important guests here every month, and we enjoy getting to know the public officials here in our life in Williamson County, and we've got a great show for you this morning. I want to welcome the folks that are watching us on WCTV Channel 3 and listening to us on WAKM AM 950. So just look forward to hearing back from you all on how you think we're doing and how you think our guests are doing. So this morning our guests are from the city of Brentwood, Mayor Ray Little, City Manager Kirk Bednar. And gentlemen, we appreciate you all taking time out of your busy days to come and kind of give us an update on what's going on in Brentwood. I think we have an opportunity in these sessions to kind of dig into your everyday life and figure out what's going on behind the scenes some there. And it sounds like a lot going on. Mayor, you been around Brentwood for several years, I think. I think you grew up there, is that correct?
I grew up around Brentwood, Yep.
And been in business there for how long?
Been in our present location since 1986, but we started in 1929. I'm the fourth generation, so.
Goodness gracious. So you've seen it grow into a city from just pretty much a country road. And you got involved in politics, I guess, about, I think, how long ago?
2009, so I've been doing it about 12 and a half years. And yeah, I always like to give the example. When I was in first grade, there were 4,000 people in Brentwood, and now there's 45,000 people in Brentwood. So it has grown a lot in my lifetime and changed drastically. But it was great when I was a kid, and it's wonderful now.
It's a beautiful city. You been mayor now for, this is your second term, I think.
Yeah, about 2.5 years.
Okay. And what, I like to ask candidates this. I'm going to go ahead and ask the mayor this. What were your priorities when you ran for office, and what is it, what are the driving, not coming up with the word I'm looking for, but what drives you to be the mayor of Brentwood?
Well, I love to serve. I've done that in my business and through church and through community organizations like Rotary, and I just looked at it as another avenue of service. My goals were transportation. Brentwood, the biggest problem we have with transportation is the people who pass through Brentwood from other communities. I think on your average day, it's not the Brentwood citizens that create so many of the different traffic issues. It's pass-through traffic, but we have to accommodate that. We have 2 major state routes, but we have a major U.S. highway and major interstate that pass through our city. So transportation was always first and foremost. Continuing to have a very financially stable Brentwood. Brentwood is a larger community than when I was young, but it's not the largest community around. And I always felt by staying financially stable, that kept us strong and allowed us to make decisions. With different road projects, even going back to transportation, by being shovel ready, by going on and acquiring property and right of way, it helps us when the state or even the federal government decides to come in and do a project. I think financial stability is important for our citizens because it keeps their taxes low, but they live in one of the most foremost communities in the world. That was very important to me. Acquisition of green space with things such as the Smith Park acquisition, most recently Windy Hill. That was very important because it gives such a high quality of life to have parks and green space and trails. But it also helps the residents' real estate values. Sometimes a park being within a mile of your home can raise your value anywhere from 10 to 30%. Those types of things. Knowing the community and having served the community and seeing so many citizens on a daily basis through my business, I also felt like I would be in tune with citizens' desires.
Right.
And I think that's what our founding fathers saw in a representative form of government, is that those who represent are close to those they do represent. And so those I could go on because there were other things, but those are an example of the reason why I decided to run for commission, but why I continue to serve. So
Let's talk to Kirk here just a minute. Kirk, you've been in City Hall at Brentwood now for a few years, haven't you?
I'm in City Hall for 21 years, yeah.
You've seen it grow as well, probably double in size in that period of time, almost.
Yeah, it's at least a 50% growth. I think we were in the mid to low 30s when I came in 2000, and as the mayor said, with the most recent census, we're at, I think, 45,300 and something.
Okay. Now, you've raised a family here, and I picked your brain a little bit before we went on the air. You've got 3 kids that one out of school, one in college, and one still in high school.
Yeah, I've got the full range. So when we moved here in 1995 from Texas, I took a job with the University of Tennessee at the time, and my oldest was 2 years old, so he's now 28, living in Nashville, self-supporting, which is a good thing. I've got a junior at MTSU, and as you said, I've got a junior at Ravenwood High School, so I've got the full range.
That's great. So you can manage City Hall from a parent's perspective as well as the city manager's perspective.
Well, and it's interesting you say that, Dave, and the mayor can equate to this, because, I mean, we have 285 full-time employees, which is a large organization, but, we like to think we're one big family at the city, and obviously we don't, like any family, we all have little differences here and there and squabbles, but while we're 285, we're still small enough where we like to think we try to treat our employees as family.
Great, that's good. Now, Mayor, your family is famous in Williamson County, has been for generations, but I think Vance Little may be the most famous Little in a long time. He's now passed away, but he was a historian here in the county for years, and I know when I'm Googling for information about any of the Williamson County or Brentwood history, his name seems to come to the surface a lot. Now, you also have raised a family in Brentwood. How many kids do you have?
2.
Okay, and I presume they're out of the house by now.
Yes, one daughter is a nurse practitioner, and I had a child that passed away. So yeah.
I'm sorry. Let's circle back to some of the things that you touched on a few minutes ago, but you all celebrated a 50-year anniversary, I guess, from the founding of Brentwood last year. What does celebrating 50 years, is there anything that brought to the surface that you thought, the next 50 years we need to accomplish this, or is it just more of the same?
I feel that because of the position of Brentwood, especially being right next to a major metropolitan area, that it just needs to continue to be very financially strong and stable. I'm sure we'll continue to work on transportation issues for the next 50 years and whatever iteration they come about. I hope it'll remain a community that is very high on quality of life, remains very controlled in its growth as it has. I think, and long before I was commissioner, I think City of Brentwood's been very wise about how it's handled growth. And even though we've grown tenfold in my lifetime, it's been done in a very thoughtful, methodical way, and hopefully that'll continue.
Is the 1 acre per house ever gonna Are you ever going to deviate from that?
I, I don't, excuse me, I don't think so in my lifetime. It's, and we basically have about 10% of our land that's still developable. Is that about right? 10, 12%? And so, as with diamonds that are very precious because they're rare, that property's very rare. And so, whoever develops it needs to be very wise in how they go about bringing proposals to our commission. And I think that is a way that controls growth. And I think most people who seek to develop in Brentwood realize that.
Right.
So,
I want to come back and touch on that. But first of all, you all seem to be a little ahead of the rest of the world on COVID preparation. And part of that personal relationships you've got in Europe, Mr. Mayor. Kirk, tell us what the city did to prepare for the craziness that spread through our world over the last 18 months. And
well, yeah, honestly, I wish I could say we actually did prepare for COVID. I don't know that we prepared for COVID, but there's a couple different ways to look at it. I guess first, operationally, as far as our city operations and what we did, and we're not different than most of the other cities around here. You've got a certain segment of your employment base that doesn't have the opportunity to work from home or flex schedules. You got police and fire, they've got to be on duty, and your utilities and such. So we did some scheduling changes, we did some crew changes, we changed hours as best we could to try to limit our employee exposures. But we had a fair number of other folks who did work from home, who could. Our technology department really stepped up, as I know they did in other cities, and had setups at home and things. And if you had told me 2 years before that you'd have 30, 40 employees working from home effectively, I probably would have been one of the old-time folks who said, no, they need to be where I can see them or people can see them. And that proved that wasn't the case. And as a result, we've now changed, and we still have continuing people working from home. It's a hybrid, or some at home, some in the office, and we'll continue that. And I think we need to, because the job market's so tough, and that's the expectation today. And so that adds to job satisfaction and hopefully keeps our employees. Operationally, we closed the library. That's our biggest single point of public contact and exposure for our employees. So we closed the library for a fair amount of time. But just like everybody else, they adapted, put a lot of programs online, and you know what? Found that people will still participate. And so we continue to do that. So for us, it was a little bit of prep. It was little things we just had in place and had to tweak. But the lesson has been that we can change the way we operate and still effectively deliver services, and so we continue to do that. Structurally, financially, I think the mayor alluded to it, we're very conservative financially, so when the unknowns of the COVID and what the impact was going to be on our budget came, we were able to scale back a little bit without any great material impact on what we were doing day to day. And as we've all found out since then, really financially, budget-wise, COVID wasn't the big negative we thought it was going to be. We I hate to say survived, but we came through very well, and I think most of our surrounding cities will say the same. And a big part of that is shopping. We're all sales tax based in terms of our primary revenue source for most part, state and local governments. People still bought. They just bought it in a different way, online. And as a result of some state law changes, thankfully, just shortly before COVID hit, that online sales tax, we came back to the locals as opposed to going into a larger state pool. And so, we've seen a significant increase. Hate to say it, but we also saw a significant increase in alcohol-related taxes. I don't know what that says. Of course, your hospitality sector, you saw hotel, motel taxes, those kind of things, did see a significant decrease. But overall, we came through very strong. We were able to make some mid-year changes in the fiscal year of 2021 and provide some pay adjustments to our employees that were cut originally. So, knock on wood, that part of it, the city was in a position that we could weather that initial storm and bounce back very quickly.
Mayor, can you add to that? I know in our private conversation before we went on there, you were telling me about friends you had in Europe that saw what was happening there and kind of gave you a heads up to more have you prepared for this?
I think the cooperation we have in our government is very important. But yeah, January of last year, as it just began, and there were just a few cases here and a few cases there, and then in February, I began to get information that this was different. This was serious. It was deadly. Didn't really know at that point how bad it was. You know, was it going to be as bad as the bubonic plague in the Middle Ages, or, you know, what? But when, you know, our emergency orders were being placed out, Kirk, myself, our assistant city manager, and I feel like many of the other leadership in the city had already been reading exhaustively, trying to get points of information, actually talking with medical doctors. The main goal, as we've gone through the different surges and the first iterations of COVID, were not to overwhelm the medical system. That's been true as even this summer, just recently our hospitals and our ICUs across the state, even here in Williamson County, have been full, and that's even with having a vaccination that's been out for now about 6-7 months. If you overwhelm your medical system, it creates all types of societal problems. But when it first hit in France and Italy, I just, through very few people I knew, was seeing information about refrigerated trucks outside the hospitals not being able to get people into the hospital because they were overwhelmed. And so going in, I knew it was, I'm not an expert in that area by any means, but going in, I knew it was serious. One thing I will say about our county, which Brentwood is part of Williamson County, and I think we try to be cooperative and I think the other governments in our county are. But when things were shut down, I guess on a Friday, by that Monday or Wednesday, Kirk, myself, I'll have to give a lot of credit to Mayor Kim Moore, Mayor Anderson, Matt Largent with the chamber. We immediately were trying to figure out, and we would have committee meetings, I guess, once or twice a week, how to get things back open, because we knew we were going to have to live with this. And so within about 6 weeks, we started formulating things to allow restaurants to open, we knew that it was like a war, but we couldn't stay in a bunker. We were going to have to get back out there, but we needed to do it in the safest fashion possible for our city employees, but also for small business. And being a small business owner, I felt it. The crisis was horrible on my business for about a year. I think it was on most people. And so, and I'll share this, Mayor Anderson and the county, we have had a briefing once a week. It's on Wednesdays among the mayors and the emergency management, Todd Horton and Kathy Montgomery and all the health department. So we have good information every week. And by God's grace, and I guess in April and May and even June, those briefings had gotten kind of quiet. They weren't lasting but about 10 minutes. But then we had another surge with the D variant. And they've been pretty intense for the last 10 or 12 weeks. Now, by God's grace, I hope they calm back down and we never have to have another surge. But looking at the history of pandemics and listening to the epidemiologists, we may have 2 or 3 more bumps in the road over the next 12, 18, 24 months. So I'm very pleased that though we took the virus seriously, we also sought ways to get people's lives back to normal, but do it in a prudent and responsible fashion.
Right. Kirk, one of the results of the COVID response from the federal government is to send every city, I think, in the country a big check to sort of compensate for the response. As I recall, it's $9–10 million for the city of Brentwood. Is that accurate?
We haven't seen the final number. We're below 50,000, so we get our money kind of passed through the state, and they haven't yet drawn it down. But we think it's closer to 12 million, but we'll find out for sure here in the next month or so.
What are you going to do with that money?
Well, that's, the federal government giveth, and the federal government puts strings on it too. So there are some limitations, and there's a lot of the allowable expenses of that funds that we really don't do. I mean, we don't have public health functions where we would, do those kind of things. So really, we're looking more, one of the categories is in the infrastructure category, which is mainly water, sewer, stormwater. The commission has kind of endorsed, we've got a large sewer project coming up here that the commission's going to vote on Monday night. Of about a $10 million project, and so we're thinking about $5 million of that will go to that sewer project. The other $7 million right now we'd like to put towards stormwater. We've got a lot of older areas, older neighborhoods in Brentwood that don't really have good drainage systems and have been experiencing more repeat flooding incidents with some of the weather phenomena happening these days with more intense rainstorms. So we'd like to put it there. We're just waiting for a little more guidance from the federal government. They've issued an interim final rule, if that makes sense, on how, with more specifics on using that funds, and the final rule is supposed to be out here shortly, because stormwater is it's not as clear cut as water, sewer, and what you can use it on. So, but our goal would be to put it more towards infrastructure and make some lasting changes in some of those older neighborhoods.
Okay. Moving on to land use and development and that sort of thing, Mr. Mayor alluded to the fact that you've still got 5 or 10% more land out there. I assume that's in the urban growth boundary, but not in the city limits. Is that?
No, still in the city limits. Still in the city limits, I would say. We get requests in the urban growth, but we don't ever seek to go. We don't seek to have anything done there. But if it fits into the city's plan in those areas, then we'll allow development, as we did with the Gall property, because it's going to be part of the puzzle to allow us to align split log and Waller and that, which there again, going back to transportation, seeking ways to improve traffic flow.
Now, the county has just started a process to take another look at the urban growth boundary, which, for our listeners, the urban growth boundary is the area that cities expected to grow to over time, and kind of have that set aside as a target area if the city were to expand. Do you see Brentwood's urban growth boundary expanding any more in this next revision?
I'll let Kirk speak more to the technicalities of that, but my understanding is we have no desire for new areas to be put in that.
I suspect Kirk's going to echo that then.
Yeah, and really, again, Brentwood is a little different in that we're landlocked to the north with Davidson County, and for the most part to the south with Franklin. And our western boundary is kind of that Beach Creek Valley, grassland area. So really, when the boundaries were first put in place back in 2000, the folks involved at the time in Brentwood did a pretty good job of looking at it from where we can realistically serve. And a lot of that goes to utilities, both water and sewer. And we set our boundaries there. So when we've looked at it here recently as part of that county effort, from a staff side, we honestly could not have identify any additional areas that we would think we could realistically grow into. Had a conversation with the commission, and they agreed. So we may be the only city in the county that proposes the exact same growth boundaries as what we had originally.
Well, I was on that committee, whenever it was, 20 years ago, that actually set those growth boundaries. And for the most part, they were designed around drainage basins, because most sewer is gravity flow. And so everybody wanted to try to be as efficient as possible there. So I take it most of the drainage basins that you would naturally serve are
in the city. Yes, for the most part. The far eastern part of our community out Waller Road, Sunset Roads, some of Split Log Road there. Is served by Metro Sewer because it's part of the old Nolensville College Grove Utility District. So, as the mayor alluded to, we have recently annexed some land out there, but primarily because it had Metro Sewer and Nolensville Water. Therefore, we did not control the utilities, so it would have developed on its own in the county if we hadn't. So,
Right.
that's a situation where we did go out and annex at the owner's request.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, we just not too far away from those properties, we turned down the annexation request because we controlled the sewer, and it's just not our policy to extend utilities solely for the purposes of development. So, but drainage basins, you're right, Dave, are the primary drivers of growth in communities because of sewer.
Right. I guess the question everybody always wants to know when it comes to Brentwood and development, is there anything going on with the Cal Turner property?
I'll let the mayor stay out of this one because
the big farm on the north side of Concord Road there between Franklin Road and I-65.
Yeah, it's almost the geographic center of town, to be quite honest with you, right there. No, there isn't. There's a subdivision that's being developed that wasn't part of the Turner farm. Most people might think it is. It's the Oman subdivision, but it was owned by the Oman family. So that is not part of the Turner farm. And no, Mr. Turner has not come forward. We have conversations with him from time to time, and he's a great steward of that land. I think long-term, he's fine with the land the way it is. He's often said that he would just like to know what it's going to be after he's gone. And that's a challenge because my answer to him is always, well, we'd like it to be exactly what it is today, and we'd like you to continue paying to keep it that way as opposed to the city. But
most people don't appreciate how much it costs to keep a place looking like that.
Well, and again, I mean, it's it generates a little bit of revenue from hay and that kind of stuff, but he's no longer doing the horse boarding business there. So no, it is a labor, or it's a love for him for that piece of property, and we greatly respect and appreciate and thank him for that. But at some point in time, whether it's after he passes away, some of that property is in trust, some of it's in the estate. So I think that's when there'll be a push to do something. And I don't have a doubt that the community will look to the city to see if the city has some role in what happens on that property. And I think long term, we've always thought there would be. A lot of it's in the floodplain. So if it ever is developed, there's an opportunity there to get some green space and perhaps some trail and park connections there. But again, I think as long as it can stay the way it is, that's fine with the community.
Speaking of the trail system, now, I think one of the goals the last time you were here was to try to get that trail system to go from east to west city limits. Can you get on a trail and go all the way across the city now?
You can get on a trail at Nolensville Road and get to I-65. You can't get across I-65, and that's always the barrier for us. We've got some engineering plans and ideas of how to do that, part of which involves the Turner property, to be quite honest. The simplest way is to go under I-65 and follow the river across his property, which understandably right now he's not interested in having that through the middle of his property. Another alternative is to kind of come up and go along Concord Road, much more challenging in terms of topography and stuff. So our issue with trails, and we, as more and more people move into the community, we have to continue telling this story, is that most of the extensive network we have on the east side of town happened because, right or wrong, that became a priority in the early 2000s, and so we planned it and did it as developments happened. As road projects happened, we coordinated effort. On the west side of 65, our older neighborhoods, that wasn't the case when they were developed. And so as a result, you try to retrofit in those areas, but unfortunately to do that, you're impacting people's private properties and backyards, and it's just difficult to do. The commission is very clear is it's not going to condemn somebody's private property to run a trail in their backyard, and I understand that. But that's just the limitation we have. And
right.
We have fewer road projects going on the west side of town where we can add trails. But now the Franklin Road project will have a trail. So our next challenge on that side is to try to connect Concord Road to Murray Lane with a bike and pedestrian trail coming up. So we can have something all the way, at least a sidewalk and or a trail all the way up and down Franklin Road.
Great. It's, that I know would be nice to have for everybody that connects to it.
And we recently added bike lanes on Granny White as we were doing a repaving project. So we always are seeking out, and that's an economical way of doing it. Didn't really change, the road. You didn't have to do new road construction, and I think the striping was $50,000, which if you put bike trails in and tried to buy the land, it'd been well into the millions. So,
okay. The again, 2 years ago was our last visit together here, and the large topic of discussion then was the Hill Center when it comes to development in Brentwood. That is almost completed, as I understand it. How has that worked out? I'm sure from a tax basis, it's added a lot of tax money to the city of Brentwood. How's the traffic working around it?
I'll just speak from going through there 6 to 12 times a day. Because of the nature where it is office building, retail, restaurant, now a hotel, it in and of itself, I don't think has created traffic issues because you don't have large numbers leaving and coming and leaving and coming in at the same time. Even the lunch period, let's say 11 to 2, it is pretty much a good flow. You don't see a lot of traffic back up there. Maryland Farms, which, for many years has provided great revenue for the city, and it's where our city hall is. It, by its nature, 7 to 9, 3:30, 4 to 6, you do have surges where lots of businesses either begin their workday or end their workday, and probably some at lunch, but lunch not as much. And so by it being primarily office, you do tend to have more traffic. But Kirk may differ with me, but I don't think so. But I've not noticed, or from City Park when that was developed, just by the nature of the variances of businesses there, we don't see a lot of traffic issues. So.
And I would agree completely. It's a unique setting in that it's got 4 traffic lights that people can come and go out of, so that really spreads it. The mix of uses spreads it. So obviously, COVID changed traffic completely anyway, so it's hard to judge now. But even pre-COVID, when that first phase was done, we did not see some of the fears that some people had that it was just going to be a nightmare there at the corner of Maryland Way and Franklin Road. It really wasn't, and we continue to not see that. Now, again, how much of that is the overall impact of COVID? But no, right now it's been everything we thought it would be in terms of activity levels, tax levels, and not the traffic impact we were concerned about.
Right. And Mr. Mayor, you work out quite a bit physically, I understand. And the YMCA, I think, was your choice of fitness centers to work out. But I noticed in the news here lately that the YMCA in Maryland Farms is going away. Now, being the mayor of Brentwood, I thought you would have had more influence than that to keep them from moving it. But tell us about why that's happening and what's going to be there when the YMCA is gone.
I don't want to speak for the Y and why they made the decision to sell that, and I'm not sure how much influence I would have had on them, but my understanding is due to the age of the building and that property, it had become very expensive to keep the Y running there. And there being a nonprofit organization and all, I think they just thought it was wise for long term. But they are going to be expanding the Y at Concord Road. In fact, those plans were just approved by the Planning Commission about a month ago, I guess. They're now in a fundraising thing to to make sure they have the funds. Maryland Farms was great, and I remember when it was a racket and tennis club, and when the Y, purchased it. But I think the time for that, because of the expense of keeping it where it was, has passed. And so hopefully the new Y will expand to the point that it will be able to accommodate, all the members of the Y. But in Brentwood, there's many health club, physical classes, cycle bars, whatever, for people to pick and choose from. So I feel that, and going back to our trail system and our parks, they offer great workout areas. I walked River Park last night after work, and it's one of my favorite activities to do. So,
Kirk, now the topic of high interest for anybody that drives through Brentwood is when is Franklin Road going to be finished? That project was started how long ago, and what was the time estimate when they?
I think we broke ground, if I remember. It was either fall of 2017, I think, or 18. So it's certainly behind schedule. I was going to say, I was trying to hand it back to you. You wouldn't take it. It was supposed to be done really in late 2020, early 2021. We're 12 to, I should say the state is 12 to 18 months behind. And it's a variety of factors. I mean, let's face it, but we're all frustrated. The commission and my bosses are express that. And it's the same old thing you hear about most road project. It's really utility related. And it's legitimate, but it's not something people can see. Yeah, so what does that mean, right? So you might not think about it, but up and down the Franklin Road corridor between Concord and Moore's Lane, you've got utility poles. Everybody can kind of see that. So you've got electric up there and probably cable and fiber maybe or whatever. But underground, you've got a number of others. So there's, I think, a total of 11 different utilities that run up and down Franklin Road there.
That's gracious.
And for the most part, they all have to move when we widen the road, because most of them are either in the right-of-way or under the road, whatever the case would be. So utility coordination, which is the process of planning, okay, where do those 11, where do they each need to go? And it's really a domino effect, because who goes first? So the first one moves, and then the other 10 figure out, or the next one figures out their plan. And so it's not a plan all 11 at once. It takes a while. And unfortunately, that really wasn't done as well on the front end as it probably should have been. Mm-hmm. So once the contract was let and the contractor began doing some of the clearing and grubbing, they quickly realized that Company A's plans showed them where Company B's plans to be, and C was on top of A, and it was just a mess. So really you had a time period where while there was construction going on, it was very limited real construction while all this, so it took about a year to get all the utility work figured out. And even once you got it figured out, though, again, it's a sequence of one can't move till the other one's done, and so it's a domino effect. So it's moving along better now. We're hopeful that you'll see, maybe by Christmas, you'll see the southern end there around Moore's Lane kind of fully complete. You can see they've got both sides of the curb and gutter in there. And then you got underground drainage that affects all of that, too. So the goal would be substantial completion by summer of 2022. So a little less than a year if everything stays on track. And of course, weather plays into that too.
So you're somewhere around 3 years into it now and looking at another 6 months?
Really almost, probably another
9 months.
If we were 12 months from today, completely done, fully striped, everything in, I think that's probably a realistic hope right now.
So what would you have done different if you had,
Well, this was
anything you could do different?
Well, it's a unique project because, as the mayor mentioned earlier, we paid for the design of the project. We paid for the right-of-way, so we negotiated with all the property owners up there. TDOT is the one that's actually let the contract doing the construction. And I would say, probably in fairness to all parties, where we kind of handed off the design to them to build is probably where we lost some coordination that should have been happening that we didn't have happen.
Right.
So that when they did actually let the contract, all that utility stuff was worked out. And not blaming utilities. I mean, they've got you talk about an AT&T. They've got stuff all over the state, projects going all over. So they deal with it when they need to deal with it at that one because they're dealing with it at 20 other places across the state. So I think we could have done, in conjunction with TDOT, when we handed off the project to them, a little better planning and coordination of utilities.
So during the engineering phase, maybe that should be a little higher priority for the future projects that we have going in the county, maybe?
Yeah, and what happens in that phase is the utilities are notified and brought in, but again, they just kind of put it on their list of future things coming. And really, they're not going to fine-tune their design until it gets much closer to construction, and that's just the nature of it all. And but it's much harder to do projects when you're widening an existing road along a heavy corridor. My friends in Franklin let it be known that they built a whole new leg of Mac Hatcher quicker than we could do Franklin Road. But in that case, they didn't have a utility anywhere in the ground. They just had, open farmland to just blow and go. And so that's a lot easier to do than what we're trying to do.
Right. It's
And historically, I'll give you a little historical perspective. Every utility runs from Franklin through Brentwood to Nashville on US Highway 31. There was a trolley line that went through there for years. There's still tracks under Franklin Road in places. And my perspective, the utility companies, a lot of that is in right-of-way. And so they're moving it on their dime. Some of it got moved, they got paid for it. Well, I mean, it's kind of like, would you rather prune roses or clear a whole fence row? And so, that's kind of like clearing a fence row. And, I'm sure they're not just jumping it up on their priority list to do something at their expense.
right.
But it's very complex through there too. So there's been frustrations and different things, but it's just a very complex project too. So,
Well, it is the concern of a lot of people. Anytime there's a road widening project, there's one planned in Franklin that has some of the same issues. And Kirk, I'll ask you one more question about that, but I think it's called a Gantt chart that shows the stage that everything has to follow. Is that realistically possible in the prior to starting construction?
It looks good on day one, but it's probably by day 7 that there's already it's thrown off. But there's just so many factors and so many parties that are involved. And as the mayor said, a very good point. The utilities, for the most part, are moving at their own dime. They're not getting paid to move, so that doesn't make it a priority. Mm-hmm. And right or wrong, good or bad, I mean, state law doesn't give us really much authority to have any hammer on them. I mean, if we say, okay, you got 30 days to give us a plan and 90 days to finish your relocation, and they don't get it done, I mean, our only thing to say is, okay, we don't have the ability to fine or issue any type of monetary penalties. So, and I'm not, that is what it is. So once we get into that project, while you've got the greatest plan and you've got the greatest schedule, there are so many factors and so many parties involved, and then you throw in weather that any project quickly goes off the rails one way or the other. It's just, can you get it back on and keep it moving?
Right. One other kind of major thing that has come to a conclusion here recently is a new census that has told us all how many citizens are in each census district, for that matter, city, county. Were there any surprises for you all coming from the 2020 census, and any changes that have to be made as a result of it?
Yeah, I don't, no real surprises. I mean, we went from, I think, our last citywide census, we were 43,000 something up to 45,000. And again, with that census happening in the middle of COVID, we were just wanting to make sure we could get back to the population we had counted a couple years before. So to be a couple thousand more was probably where we thought we would be. our commissioners aren't run by districts, so we don't have to do redistricting like I know the county is going through, and Franklin and some of the others will eventually have to do. So that's one nice thing about being all at large, and we don't have to deal with that. As far as population makeup in our community, it's, we're seeing a little bit of an uptick in maybe some of the Asian, Indian demographics, but it's still, relatively small overall in terms of our demographics. So no major shift in the demographics. You'll see more population growth on the east side than the west side, but that's where the new development's happening, so that really is not a surprise. So overall, I wouldn't say there was any surprises. We're still digging into the details by census tract, but I would say overall, not a surprise.
I would like to send a thank you to, of course, Kirk and our staff, but Jeff Dobson, Planning and Codes, and all that coordinated the census, because if you think about it, doing that census last year with COVID, it's amazing how well, and I don't know that all communities around the United States did, but Brentwood and Williamson County and all did in collecting good census data.
So, given that the Senate and the House of Representatives now have committees on redistricting, do you all have any advice for them as far as how to lay out the state representative and state Senate districts as they affect Brentwood?
My dad taught me a long time ago not to comment on things that are above my pay grade, so.
Well, and that's above my pay grade too. I mean, the reality is, we've got the Brentwood, obviously, Jack, from a Senate side, Jack covers the whole county. And I think there's a question of how that shakes out. Representative-wise, we've got kind of Glenn Cassidy has the far east side of town, and then Brandon Ogle's the majority of the town. And if you just look at the county numbers, I know that some of that's going to shift and kind of move east and balance out between the growth in Nolensville and Thompson Station and all that. So I would expect we'll see some change. Ideally for us in a perfect world, the fewer representatives you have, I don't know, maybe the more the better, but I think it's always tough when you have a representative that has just a little bit of your city and a lot of others. And for the most part here in Williamson County, we're all kind of on the same page when it comes to issues in the legislature. But every once in a while, we may have an issue that affects us differently than another city. And so you'd like to make sure you've got representation that has enough of your city to be invested in and interested in you.
Right. I'll use Tom Lawrence's phrase, curveball question now. The last time we were here,
Let me step up into the batter's box a little bit for that curveball.
one of the hot topics 2 years ago was whether or not Brentwood needed its own school district. I hadn't heard much about that lately. Is that issue died, or where did it go?
I think the fact that the Williamson County schools are so excellent, as you can see by their test scores, and what was it? And forgive me if I get the number wrong. It was 32 National Merit Scholarship finalists. That's incredible from one county. You asked if it died. I think it pretty much has. So I haven't heard anything about it in a couple of years. So,
Great, Kirk. I think the city did a financial analysis of that. Is that right?
Well, yeah. Really, the issue when it came up a few years ago was to quote do a study to see whether it's viable. The reality is there's some nuances to state law that don't answer some of the questions you would need to have answered to do a viable study, which is what happens to the existing county buildings.
Right.
Some of the folks who felt like it was an option we should consider believe that the county buildings would just go with the students and they would become part of a city district. And I know our friends at the county had a different view on how that would happen. And so until you had that answer, you couldn't really do a financial study. But the reality is, by state law, on day one, regardless of the buildings, you'd have a 60% increase in the city property tax rate from day one. And then you get a elected school board who the city commission has no control over, who then every year keeps coming back to you for more money. So, you know, people would point to somewhat the budgeting dysfunction at the county, they would call it, where the county school board says, here's what we need, and then the county commission says, well, here's what we'll give you, and live with it. And my answer to that was, all you do is change that dynamic to the city school board coming to the city commission.
Right.
You don't solve that problem of having, in a lot of places where I grew up, where I worked in Texas, you had independent taxing school boards. They had to answer to their own tax rate. Here, you don't have that.
Yep.
So that funding battle would just shift to the city. You'd have the same battle, it'd just be different people involved. So that, the uncertainty of the school buildings, and the fact that you start on day one with a 60% increase in the city property tax rate, you know, when you have such a great county school district, seemed to kind of put the whole thing to bed.
For a city that hasn't had a tax increase in 30 years, I believe, I would say the city commission might have a problem with that.
Yeah, and I'm one of those individuals that I didn't mind us having the study, because at the time there were a number of citizens who did, but as I got into it deeper and deeper, unless the state legislature, which from all of my little queries has no plans in doing, unless they change state law, you're not going to have another city school system. So it becomes a moot point, and so there's no sense in fighting windmills. So
I just realized I just skipped over one of probably the biggest announcement y'all have had in a while is the opening of the new police headquarters. And tell us about that and why you needed a $28 million police headquarters.
good. I thought you were going to throw a slurve, but that's more like a fastball belt high. I'll share. I don't ever like to speak for the commission, but just observing how they've voted and acted even years before I got on there. Safety and security is always real important at Brentwood. And I'm sure people get tired of this, but I go back to the old Maslow hierarchy of need. If you don't have safety and security at the base of the triangle, the other things don't matter a whole lot. And so I think safety and security, and you can even see in our budget, is very important to the city and citizens of Brentwood. And it had become time, I guess we first started discussion about 7 years ago, kind of preliminary discussions. And the fact that we had property already there on, by the rec center and the heritage and all. And that's centrally located, which helps a whole lot on response time. It also opens up areas in City Hall, which help as our city is growing for future expansion. We tend to stay lean. I think we're a third below the national average for number of citizens and government employees, so we don't just suddenly hire. We try to do that to keep our tax burdens low, but the police headquarters is state of the art. It's beautiful. I think our men and women and our police force appreciate the fact that they're pretty much in one facility, which helps with cooperation. My sense is it'll be 35 to 70 years, depending on a number of different factors, before the city of Brentwood will have to look at least building a large headquarters, because we built it in such a way that there is room for expansion for staff, and as the city grows and we have to put more staff on there. Personally, as a commissioner who does try to watch our citizens' tax dollars, I was very pleased, especially in today's climate of construction cost and all, of what we were able to build and the price. I think it was a great value to the city. So I'll just have to say I'm very, very proud of that. So,
right. We're running out of time. Is there any questions from our audience this morning that want to cover anything we haven't covered yet this morning? If not, Kirk, is there anything that you all want to cover that we haven't touched on so far?
Yeah, I just quickly one item, another project we've got going. That's I think a big thing for the community is we're working with the local Rotary clubs to develop an inclusive playground in Granny White Park. The Rotary clubs came to us, the city, and said, listen, we'd like to be part of this as a community project. They've committed to fundraising. They're doing very well in their fundraising. There will actually be, I think, a big announcement in a few hours at the noon club meeting today with a naming sponsor for the playground in Granny White Park. So this will be we've got a great playground in Granny White Park that we are literally going to tear out of the ground. Now we'll repurpose most of that equipment so it won't be wasted, and are going to develop an inclusive playground. A lot of communities around here are doing it. Gallatin, Hendersonville, Franklin has plans as part of their Southeast Park. But a playground that is for all ages and all abilities, but is specifically designed with equipment that is suitable for children with disabilities, wheelchair ramps and swings for wheelchairs and those kind of things. And it's something we don't have in our park system. So I just want to recognize that the Rotary clubs are doing that. There's still, if there's anybody interested in being a part of that from a sponsorship standpoint, there's some abilities to have your names on certain pieces of equipment and all that. But again, they have secured a naming rights sponsor for the playground at Granny White. Our goal would be to have that open by June of next year, if everything falls into place. We're getting ready to bid some of the site work, and literally yesterday I was scrolling through pages and pages of playground proposals from vendors and all these great color pictures, and it's kind of like Christmas. I like that piece and I like that piece, and you got to try to fit it all together. So we hope to have everything under contract by Thanksgiving and some of the site work over the winter and early spring months, and then the playground going in kind of the April-May time frame, and hopefully a June opening if everything comes together.
That's great. Mr. Mayor, the last word.
Yeah, first I'd like to say I do appreciate our city staff and Kirk and all their hard work and their excellence. Our staff always seem to receive awards. I also want to thank my fellow commissioners because I think everybody has Brentwood's best interest in heart that sits on the commission. And I was sitting here thinking the inclusive playground is great, and then of course our Citizens for Brentwood Green Space, and it has helped raise funds for certain projects at Smith Park. I reflected, Brentwood has changed and grown, but it's not. And that reminds me of what my ancestors would have done, which would have been barn raisings and harvesting with one another. Our community, I think, truly reflects that community spirit of what you want in a community. And it is government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And our citizens put in extras so that we have extras. And I think that's one thing that makes Brentwood such a wonderful place to live and work.
Just really appreciate the time y'all have taken to be here with us. Dr. Lampley, every college and high school ought to have a class that listens to these shows, because I know I get such a huge appreciation for what the city administrators and elected officials do. And there's just so much going on that we don't even think about most of the time, and we appreciate y'all being here to share that with us and give us the background on so many issues that you all face. Got a lot of people to thank for making this happen. First of all, Williamson Inc., our chamber, headed by Matt Margin, and this effort kind of quarterbacked by Kel McDowell. Nancy Conway is always a rich source of research, and we just appreciate all that team does to make us look good. Creed Henderson with WCTV packages it up and puts it on YouTube for us, in addition to the live stream. And Creed, we appreciate all y'all do. And then the WAKM team for getting us on the radio with Tom Lawrence. Also have a financial contribution that helps make this happen from AT&T and Vanderbilt University. We of course appreciate that. And most of all, we appreciate Columbia State giving us such a wonderful facility to meet and greet folks. And Dr. Lampley, Mary Beth Shalley, make us feel welcome, and we very much appreciate that. Look forward to having y'all back on October 29th. We anticipate having the newly elected alderman from the city of Franklin, as well as the retiring alderman, to see what we can learn and see what they have learned from the campaigning process, and see what to expect going forward in Franklin. Thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you back next month.